from Ohio to Pennsylvania, we had to empty out a file cabinet, mostly full of dated term papers from undergrad and all those resources we were sure we were going to return to again and again, but had again and again been relegated to the garage filing cabinet. And all those tax returns, you're never quite sure. Is it 7 years you keep them? We were selling the cabinet, no room in the new place, so everything had to go. And you know how hard it is when you're moving because you have to touch everything you own, and you have to be fast about it. If you hold something in your hands for too long, you're sunk. In a move, you don't have time to read Grandma's treasured birthday cards or that note from a dear mentor on your thesis. In the box or in the trash, go, go, go. Everything had to be pulled out, handled, and dealt with, including a particular document that was to me very shameful. It was this letter, typed, carefully worded, sent to me, that laid out all the ways I had failed. And I kept it for so many reasons. I kept it for the days that I believed it was true. And I kept it for the days that I believed it was a fabrication. I kept it to remember I hadn't measured up. And I kept it to remember that maybe measuring up wasn't the sum total of who I was. Make no mistake, the letter was mean-spirited and cruel, and I don't want you to think it's some skeleton in my closet. It wasn't anything like that. Not a word of the letter was, by my reasoning, the truth. But I held on to it because human relationships are messy, and we can hurt one another even when we don't mean to. So I had this letter for like a year and a half, and I knew it was in that, it was like the telltale heart, right? I knew it was in the cabinet. And when I got to it, I was sunk. I held on to it for too long. I couldn't bring it with me. I couldn't hold on to this person's vision of me any longer. So Matt and I hauled out that rusty fire pit that everybody has, right? And we threw in some kindling, and I let the fire consume the letter that had consumed me for so long. Oh, thanks. What I realized in that moment was how much I had let someone else's image of me in the letter and before it. I let that image define who I was, and not the one in whose image I was made. So the giving of the Ten Commandments is the climax of the book of Exodus. It's the moment where God reveals God's self to the people. Everything, the burning bush, the Passover, the dividing of the sea, the manna in the wilderness, the long walk to Sinai, all of it was to come to this moment. And there's so much fanfare leading up to it. There's lightning, and there's thunder, and there's a cloud descending. And then these first words, everything is just quiet. The first words, I am the Lord your God, finally answer the question Moses posed in chapter 3. What is the name of the God who sends me? What is the name of the God who sets the people free? This is it. In these words, the people will know the God who they follow as a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. They will know the God who leads them out of bondage and into the promised land. And so in this moment, God begins by calling from the people fidelity to God's self and to God's image. Now, idols are the perversion of someone vibrant and dynamic into something static and sedate. Idolatry objectifies the living, the moving, the beyond our knowledge. You can't have faith in an idol precisely because an idol is logical and straightforward. You can know everything there is to know about an idol. Ethicist Larry Rasmussen writes in The Planet You Inherit that faith isn't about living with certainty. It's not about being confident, or it is about being confident, even joyous, about living with untractable uncertainty and profound mystery. Absolute certainty has no need of faith. An idol is stability, which is useless when you're wandering around in the precarious wilderness. At this moment, Israel has finally come face to face with God, and it immediately becomes clear that everything up until that point has been a caricature. You can see it in all the moments where their faith has faltered. The whining about the plagues, the fear at the Red Sea, the hunger in the wilderness, the hoarding of the manna. They haven't had faith in God. They have only trusted in themselves. Abraham Joshua Heschel, one of the leading Jewish theologians of the 20th century, once considered why the Torah is so concerned with idolatry. And sometimes folks say it's because God is unimaginable, implying by the root of the word that God has no image. But that's not it, Heschel says. No, it's precisely because God has an image that idols are forbidden. You are the image of God. It turns out that is the image I take in vain most often. I spend hours and hours wrestling with a false image. I'm always holding it before myself, this unattainable image of the perfect woman and the perfect mother and the perfect wife and the perfect pastor. No one of these images actually rooted in reality. Not a single one is attainable. Not a single one takes into account the particular giftedness and belovedness with which God has actually filled me. Heschel says, the only medium in which you can shape that image is that of your entire life. To take anything less than a full, living, breathing human being and trying to create God's image out of it, that diminishes the divine and is considered idolatry. You can't make God's image. You can only be God's image. It's funny how, even as that thought convicts me, proclaiming me guilty of idolatry, it sets me free. When I'm able to keep this commandment, and by extension most of the others, the result is that I am mercifully and completely removed from the center of the universe and the center of my relationships. You know, when Luther considers each commandment in turn in the small catechism, each one is introduced with the phrase, we are to fear, love, and trust God. If an idol is a caricature of God, it is not lost on me how often that idol is also a caricature of myself. And when I finally lay that idol down, I no longer have to fear, love, and trust that false self. I'm now free to fear, love, and trust God above all things. It doesn't have to depend on me. It doesn't have to be completely perfect. When I'm set free, the rest of the world opens up. Remember when Job finally hits rock bottom and God shows up in a whirlwind to sweep Job out of the center of the universe? Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding, God says. Suddenly the whole world and each person in it is opened up as the image of God, holy and divine, as worthy of delicate care and compassion as me. Amen.